Okay, so today we are getting into best practices, what it means, what they are, can we do better, how do we evaluate practices, and get into the employee experience and best practices surrounding the employee experience and benefits and wellness and all that good stuff. It's a big topic, so let's get started. Okay, so I put this best version of you in here because in order to evaluate best practices, you have to personally focus on your own best practices and trying to be the best version of you as the decision maker and the leader or one of the leaders of an organization. So I put best practices, good practices, better practice. Better practice. Okay. So let's define best practices as we look at this. A procedure that has been shown by research and experience to produce optimal results and that is established or proposed as a standard suitable for widespread adoption. Okay, and that's by the Webster Dictionary. And then the wiktinary says a well-defined procedure that is known to produce near optimum results. I like the shorter definition here, but I just prefer concise, shorter definitions. And as I was brushing up on this topic and working on this presentation, there have been a lot of debate around best practices in the last 10 years or so, saying that there's no such thing as a best practice, throw best practices out the window. There's no such thing. We shouldn't even focus on them. We need to tear this all down and rebuild it. And I understand where this perspective is coming from. And I have a particular way of viewing this. So to get to the bottom of who's right, who's right in this argument, is there such thing as a best practice? Or do we just need to throw it all out and start all over? Okay, so in this Forbes article, it's called Best Practices Aren't. And if you research this for more than 5 minutes, you'll find dozens of articles that say pretty much the same thing. And I took this excerpt out of that article to, instead of reading the entire article, just an excerpt to give you an idea of one side of the argument. And it's by Mike Myatt. And he says, let me begin with a bold statement that I'm sure will unleash a wrath of many. There's no such thing as a best practice. The reality is best practices are nothing more than desperate groups of methodologies, processes, rules, concepts, and theories that attain a level of success in certain areas. And because of those successes have been deemed as universal truths, able to be applied anywhere and everywhere. Just because someone says something doesn't mean it's true. Moreover, just because company A had success with a certain initiative doesn't mean that company B can plug and play and the same process and expect the same outcome. There's always room for new thinking and innovation, or at least there should be. So I agree. And with his framing here that just because it works in one organization doesn't mean it's going to work in another. However, that doesn't mean that we throw out all evidence of procedures, policies, and ways of thinking that have worked for others in the past, right? So let's go back to the definition. It's a well-defined procedure that has been known to produce near optimum results. It's a procedure. It's just a procedure. So when looking at this, a procedure at one company may not work at another company, and that can be issues with implementation. There can be issues around commitment and culture from the team. There's lots of reasons why a particular best practice may not be working, and maybe those root issues are what the organization should be focusing on rather than throwing out best practices altogether, right? Maybe trying a best practice, maybe the start, especially if it's a newer business. They implement what they interpret as and how they're interpreting the best practice into their organization, find failure in that implementation, and discover why they're having issues implementing that best practice and are better because of it. Okay, so just some examples there. Best practices comes from the manufacturing industry, 3D space, right? Putting a widget together, putting a car together, a assembly line. And one of the first places it pops up is in government regulations. So for example, there was a Biologics Control Act of 1902. And it was a response to some deaths that occurred as a result of vaccinations and pharmaceuticals that were not properly sourced. The ingredients were not sourced properly, and there was some contamination. And I believe they even knew about the producer of the medication even knew about the contamination and didn't want to waste the material. So they put it out and treated people with it anyway. And some people died. So because of the outrage surrounding those deaths, this act was created, and it created the Hygenic Lab of the United States, which turned into the NIH. Okay, so just a little bit of history there, framing as to why we have best practices to begin with. All right. So as in most things, there's a balance here, and not that all things need balance. There are times when we are working on an initiative and we need to have imbalance, right? We throw all of our resources at it, get through the initiative in a shorter amount of time, and there's a payoff to throwing more resources at something for a shorter amount of time so that you can reap the benefits of that implementation later. For example, some new automation in your business. You may be working really hard. Maybe one person is working really hard on creating some automation in your business, and you've determined that that project now is going to take a year with just that one person. And then if you throw 4 more people on it, it'll get done in 3 months. And the time saved is 20 hours a week for 10 people in your business. Oh my gosh, yeah, let's throw a much bigger team on this because we want to reap the rewards of saving 20 hours or 10 hours a week or whatever you determine the savings is going to be, right? So there may be some imbalance there in resources for that, and other projects may suffer as a result. But of course, they will have a compounding effect later because you can take those 5 people and redistribute them to those other projects that were abandoned or delayed as a result of initiative 1. Okay, so when we're looking at which initiatives to focus on and how to focus on them, whether to do 5 at once or just focusing on 1 at a time, there is value in focusing on 1 at a time. Oftentimes, I've heard this analogy drawn to drug addiction, right? If someone is addicted to drugs, they go away for 30 days into, they get moved from their normal environment and placed into a different environment for 30 days with support systems and counseling, and they are completely removed from their normal activities in order to focus on overcoming this addiction, right? And that can often happen with diet and exercise. If someone is focused on diet and exercise, they may spend a lot more time, energy, and effort, especially in the beginning, to master, to rewire their brain, to reap the benefits of these new habits. It takes a while to establish a new habit, to make it automatic in your life, to integrate it into your identity, and there will be more mental resources, emotional resources, sometimes more money thrown in to this process, especially in the beginning. Some people just takes a couple of months. Other people, it takes a couple of years where they really need to focus on this because perhaps they have more to change, more emotional and mental hurdles to overcome in this area. So and then others can do multiple things at once. Maybe they have more resources and they can hire people to help them. Maybe they can hire a coach, or they can hire a chef, or they can outsource some of the burden onto others because of the resources that they have. So this is all going to depend, and then tying that back into a company, it's going to depend, is this for a solopreneur? Is this for someone who has 50 million in revenue or more and has a team, an HR team, and so on? There are different stages in the process and how businesses can approach some of these initiatives. So when I say focus on one initiative at a time, again, that's a best practice. That's a best practice for most initiatives that are your number one priority. It may be and similar to interpersonal development, it may behoove you, if you're in a situation where you're dealing with morbid obesity, to throw everything you have at reducing your cholesterol, reducing your weight, because if you don't get that under control, you're not going to have a higher quality of life, and you're not going to live long enough to realize financial success, or you're not going to have the energy to progress in your business, right? Same thing goes for other initiatives. There may be one particular initiative as you go through an assessment process that you really need to focus on. It's usually not years, okay? It's usually a couple months. However, especially if you have a team that can throw down and everybody's motivated and everybody's on board with the vision and that's communicated really well, that you can throw down and really get it done. So in that sense, best practices don't exist. In that way, that argument of best practices is going to be different for different organizations. However, we have to go through the best practice of assessment, questionnaires, data gathering, sitting down and digging into those, figuring out what those initiatives are and the values of the business to make those decisions. If we don't know what the values of the business are, we're not going to be able to align with those and make good decisions that are going to benefit the direction of the business overall, correct? So I broke this down. I like to look at this at the left-right brain. And yes, there is a left brain tendency and there is a right brain tendency. Doesn't mean that there's a wall here, that there's no interaction between the two, and that when you're drawing, you're not also using your left brain. So don't get too fixated on that. That would be a little bit left-brained, too much left brain thinking. Okay. So I'm tying this in because this happens with decision making and can happen with businesses. And we want to make sure that we are taking a logical approach and a mathematical approach, but also opening that space for the artistic, the innovative, and the creative. Okay. So looking at it in a left-brained way, and this is what the articles are fighting against. So we have more left brain crisis in business overall than we do right brain crisis. So there's positives and negatives to both. And that's why I argue that taking a balanced approach is the best way, and trying to use both sides and become a holistic person and a holistic organization to benefit from both ways of thinking. Okay, so the reason why you have a best practice is so people don't die, right? That's the original intent behind best practices. It's like, okay, we source the materials this way and we test the materials this way to make sure if we put it in our product, people don't die, right? Due to contamination. So there's a reason why those practices are in place now. However, if the left brain thinking gets too out of control, everything's about auditing, everything's about what's worked in the past, it's always been done this way. So if that is the answer to why are you doing this, it's always been done this way. And as you dig and you ask more questions, there's not really any other reason than it's always been done this way. To continue that practice, it's time to dig in and figure out why. There are certain areas where you really need people that do these things, right? You want to make sure you're following the rules, not breaking the law. You're not going to do anything that gets anybody taxed or penalized, I mean. So there are reasons for such best practices in that very rigid world of law and certain mathematics and auditing, right? Quality control and so on. Okay. And I want to bring up, because there's not a lot of talk about creativity gone haywire. And I'm tying this to the right side of the brain, right? The creative, the artistic, all the articles, all of the groupthink around this right now is how do we push our company to be more creative? How do we push innovation? How do we push this side? Businesses are feeling stuck in the left brain. They're feeling stuck in this, in fear, right? Part of it's fear driven. I'm just going to do what I've always done, just to make sure I can survive. It's the survival mechanism that kicks in, the reptilian brain, if you will, the R complex, if you will, kicks in, and it becomes a fear-based decision. And that's when you get into, let's do what we've always done. Let's do what we know works and go from there. And that is absolutely valid. I'm not disagreeing with that. I think that creativity and innovation is absolutely 100% so important. I love art. I'm an artist myself. However, when I see an imbalance in the market, I want to bring forward some of the other side of the argument. So the other side of the argument would be creativity can go haywire. If unchecked, there may be consequences. You've seen projects, I'm sure, where someone throws everything they have, all their time, money, and effort, blood, sweat, and tears into something, and perhaps that creates an imbalance. They're not looking at the business side of their creativity. So they end up with the shopping cart, right? Or they end up in debt, IOUs, they end up in jail, right? If you're running a business and you're not following some of the left brain um, best practices of paying taxes and following a certain level of rules, um, you're going to end up in a bad situation, right? Maybe not in jail, but you could. There's certain risk takers that are very creative that take too much risk, and there's a downside to that, correct? And there's no risk, no fun is a saying. So I was trying to find some pictographs of words similar to this. And most of the words were left brain kind of sayings that people were pointing out as red flags. And this is one of the more popular ones because we've always done it that way. And I agree that that is not always a good reason, but if the reason has to do with it keeps us away from penalties, it keeps everybody out of jail, it keeps everybody off the street, make sure that we're making a profit, make sure that the bills are paid, those sorts of things, need to have that covered before you allow yourself to kind of dive into some of the more creative and innovative stuff, right? So with that said, personally, look at yourself and say, what do you want to change? What do you want to change in your business? What do you want to change in your life? And take the time to envision a better future for your business and yourself, and take the balanced approach, correct? Looking at both. Is this decision going to put me at more risk, or is this decision going to lead me to more freedom and help me gain more resources in my business and drive towards my values and within my business and myself? Okay, so that's when we get into some of the market research around this. There's the rational decision making, and then there's the emotional decision making. Oftentimes, this has to do with market research and branding. Who is the decision maker in the purchasing of your product? So you've got the females, the ones that are most of the decision making is done by the females. They're going to be branding towards the emotional side, and then the products that are more geared towards the rational are going to be geared around the rational brain, which is usually the more masculine side. Okay, it doesn't mean that men can't have these emotional traits and women can't have the masculine traits of the left. So left is usually aligned with the masculine, and the right is usually defined by the feminine energy. Doesn't mean you can't have both, right? But this is just to bring awareness to the way our psychology works in decision making, so that we can pinpoint why we're making certain decisions and if it's serving us or not, and kind of tear down some of those, I'm doing it just because that's the way it's always been done, or I'm doing it out of fear. It might not be the best way or the most efficient way. And the way we tear some of that down is to be aware, right? The first step is awareness. So that's why a lot of times you'll see legal brands, insurance brands, and the like. The branding is very conservative and focusing on quality, and there's a warranty and the features and the price, right? And when you're looking at brands that are related to cleaning the home, taking care of the home, taking care of children, the branding is more geared around social proof and trust and confidence. Now, there's a meshing of this, of course, but I'm just tying some correlations to where you can see it in the real world. Okay, so we want to have decision making with the probability side and the desirability side. So we want to see what we want and look at the probabilities and the logic behind whether or not we can accomplish that goal. Do we have the time and the resources to get this project completed, right? So first you want to clear out the clutter in your mind and physically, reset, go to a new place. I like to change. The change of environment, I think, is really, really big. Using a pen and paper, there's something very special about using a pen and paper and getting that creative mind flowing. With vision, evaluate. So as you write and as you ask and write your questions, ask and answer your questions, you're going to want to look at your own answers and evaluate whether or not that's true. Okay, is that just something that you're telling yourself, or is that the truth? Is that just something that you believe, or is that the truth? Okay, so as you go through these evaluations and these assessments, the goal is to discover the root of the issue, of an issue that may be presenting itself, and make a decision and commit to a new action or a new initiative. Could be big, it could be small, could be something, just a little tweak. Might be doing everything great, but there may just be a little tweak you have to do in your culture. Maybe it's just some additional training, and maybe it's just visiting your employees once a month and saying hi to them in a Zoom meeting, or something really small that can make a big adjustment. Or it could be something big. It could be a new system, a whole new CRM, or a whole new enrollment system, or a whole new automation system. It could be really a bigger project that's going to take more time and resources and evaluation and testing. And then making a daily commitment to the progress of that initiative and checking in on it and making adjustments along the way in the process. Record time and whether or not it's realistic. So as you go through the project, you may assume that it's going to take Sally 10 hours a week to work on a project. After the first 2 weeks, Sally comes back to you and says, I am trying to get this done in 10 hours a week, but if I spent 20 hours or even 40 hours a week on this, that's the only way. I'm getting pulled in too many different directions. And at that point, you may have to either work with Sally on coaching and how to segment her time better and manage her time and her focus better, or you have to get Sally some help in that project, or take some things off of Sally's plate and give it to someone else, rearrange things for Sally. And the only way to know that is for that time, recording that time and seeing what you're spending your time on, or what your employees are spending their time on in general, when there's a new project or a new initiative brought into the mix. Rework daily. So evaluate, it might not have to be daily, but especially when a new habit or a new project or a new set of behaviors or a new responsibility is put on someone, it can take a time, right? There's a learning process. There may be a new system brought in, or there may be a new person that they have to work with, and there's fear from that employee that you've delegated the task to of interacting with that new person. And maybe they're procrastinating on doing that because they're not comfortable, because it's a new relationship. Maybe they're more of an introvert and maybe they weren't bought in 100% to the process, or they don't feel comfortable for whatever reason. You may have to check in on a daily basis in the beginning to make sure that things are getting done, and that work is being made on the set amount of time that was committed. So if it was an hour a day or an hour and a half a day commitment, checking in the first couple of days and seeing if there's any mental roadblocks or technical roadblocks or training roadblocks. You've asked an employee to work in a system that you thought they knew, and come to find out that they they don't even know how to log in, right? And it's been 3 days and you just follow up with them. Hey, how's it going in that new system? Have you loaded that information yet or marked those projects off? And they go, oh yeah, I thought I didn't know how to log in. I haven't gotten to it yet. So making sure you're checking in on those things on a consistent basis, and especially in the beginning, keep what you like and leave the rest. There may be suggestions. You may take seminars. You may work with me and go through an assessment. I may make it a suggestion. You might like half of what I say in this presentation. You may hate half of what I say in the presentation. It's your business. It's your life. I'm just trying to offer up some situations and strategies and questions that have worked for me in the past in working with businesses and working on myself, and offering them up as an opportunity to improve and reach our goals and be better tomorrow than we are today. So take what you like and leave the rest. I love that. It always seems impossible until it's done. This is another really great saying when looking at something. And oftentimes the entrepreneur, the founder of the organization, gets this. They get excited when somebody says it's impossible. However, your team is not an entrepreneur. A lot of them haven't started a business before. They don't have this mindset, at least not yet. You may be trying to help them get this mindset, but making sure that you communicate your vision and how that the project and the initiative is going to benefit the people working on it at the end of it, and how it's going to benefit the business overall, and make sure that you are communicating how it's going to affect everyone for the better, even though it's a painful change, or it might seem painful to one of your team members to make this change. Some people adapt to change better than others, okay? And that's why I like to call this a practice. It's a best practice. You're just practicing, right? And certain practices, there is more room for error than others, as we talked about, the ones that have to do with auditing and taxes and penalties and fines. There's going to be less room for error in those. But as you are working towards the more creative solutions in your business, your employees are going to require a certain amount of training and practice around these new skills that are coming down the pike right now. So just lightening the term, it's just a practice. You're just practicing. A practice is a repetition of an activity to improve skill. You're improving skills for yourself and for your organization. That's it. That's all you're working towards. So that's why I called this best practice, better practices, best practice. That's why I named the presentation the way I did, because it comes down to what repetitive activities are you and your employees doing every day to improve your skills, to improve your company. Okay, and this is where this term learning agility is really taking off. And I 100% agree that this is so important. And it comes down to ability to learn. Okay, so, and as I was saying before, some team members have a harder time with change. So we need to be aware of that and sensitive to that, and encourage them to improve their learning agility. And to define this term further, I found this infographic that was really interesting. You have to have introspection and self-awareness. You have to have mental agility, people agility, change agility, and results agility. Okay, so there are different areas in learning agility, and people can improve in this area. The brain is malleable. The brain is plastic. It can change. You can teach old dogs new tricks. Some people are more prone to to adapt to this a lot easier. Some personalities adapt to this a lot easier. However, it doesn't mean throw out all the other employees right away, right? If they're not adapting to this learning agility, perhaps getting training in what a learning agility is and why it's important, making sure that the employees that are maybe resistant to change, resistant to new relationships with the new person they're working with. So, for example, when I'm working with perhaps a new HR person or a new HR generalist, because I'm gathering information, I'm trying to implement a new benefits package or a new wellness initiative or a new online enrollment system, I'm going to need information. And perhaps that HR generalist isn't comfortable with me yet. There may be resistance there if they've got a lower learning agility. They don't understand the project completely, or they don't trust me completely. It can cause some disruption in the implementation process and the process of us working together. Mental agility comes down to looking at the problems and looking at it in unique ways and being solutions driven. Okay. Driving, yeah, you see the negative stuff, you see the downfalls of things, but you push past that and look towards the positive as well. Okay. So you're able to weigh both sides. The extent to which an individual knows his or her true strengths and weaknesses. So looking at self-awareness, the self-reflection that I'm asking the employer to do and the managers to do. If you have employees that do this as well, it's really going to help your organization push forward and adapt and use technology and the newer technologies that are coming down the pike to the highest level that you can. Okay, results agility, delivering results in first time situations. So just seeing the challenge, learning the new software, taking the training, absorbing the new training, and being driven by that hard work because they see the joy in creating that hard work and that results. And they're not afraid of learning. Some people are afraid of new tasks and afraid they're stupid. They have all this baggage in their head that is telling them they're not capable or they're not smart enough or they're not good at this, and helping your staff overcome some of those and be aware of those thoughts and work on changing those thoughts can really benefit everyone and the organization as a whole, especially as, like I said, we're moving towards this technology age and there's new wonderful software out there that makes life a lot easier, but it is new and it is different. And employees and teams need to be aware of that. There is going to be more training. There's going to be a lot more learning. We're going to have to might keep this program for 2 years, then we might change it because a better one comes out. I mean, these softwares are advancing and hardware is advancing and becoming better and better and more efficient, and changes will happen. And your team needs to be willing to take those trainings, absorb the new information, implement, work with new people, evaluate themselves in the process, and push through to completing those project cycles. Okay, so as I look at my assessments, these are some of the best practices that I keep in mind, and they're more principles. It's not like this rigid procedure, although there are rigid procedures when you look at HR and legal. However, there is a softer side to HR, and the primary goal of HR should be providing security to the employees, selective hiring, self-managed and effective teams, fair and performance-based compensation, training and relevant skills, creating flexible work situations, and making information easy and accessible to the employees. So they are your PR representative to your employees, and they're also making sure that your ass doesn't end up in jail. Making sure the employees are getting all of the notices, all of the onboarding. These new employees are getting all the information they're required to get and then some, and are able to onboard in a smooth, effective way that creates these self-managed and effective teams, creates that trust with your organization, creates that excitement about working for your company. So HR is so important, and absolutely loves some of these best practices that Jeff Pfeffer brought up in his book. He's written a couple of books, Human Equation and um, The Competitive Advantage Through People. Okay. So really great guy, really looking at the human side of business and how humans getting healthy, well, taking care of humans in your business, driven humans with this learning agility in your business is really going to drive that needle forward. And part of that is the employee experience, making sure that your employees have incentives and are free to focus on their personal wellness. They have good benefits. You have a good, safe culture where they feel free to express their opinions for new ideas, and their expectations are clear around their job and each project they're given. You have adequate systems and technology and software for the employees to get the work that they need to get done in the time that you're asking them to do it. There's clear communication between the employee, management, HR, and executives. There's a clear consistent onboarding process. I'm just seeing a huge mess of things in this area, and most companies would do best focusing on this first and then pushing to all these other areas. Again, that's a best practice. Maybe you're doing this great already. If you're doing this great already, you can focus on these other things. But a lot of these assessments that I have, and there's different assessments for different situations. There's different assessments for what group, what industry, what size you are, and so on. But most really need to hone in on being consistent in this area before they can build trust with their new hires. It's a really great opportunity. It doesn't mean if you don't have a consistent onboarding process that you're not going to have trust with your employees, but you're starting behind, you're making up for your lack in the onboarding process if this isn't dialed in. If an employee isn't properly educated on their benefits up front, and the employee is then reacting later when they actually need to go to the doctor, they're not getting that information in a timely manner. They might think to themselves, why is the employer not getting me the information I need in an appropriate amount of time? What else is going on here? It might cause some doubt and some insecurity and some additional thought that doesn't need to happen. It can just all be systematic and available to them. And as long as you're communicating where that information is housed, they can access it without any issues. Okay. So keeping in mind that the last 2 years has been unprecedented and is affecting employees. Okay, so this is some recent statistics. 63% of today's full-time workers have low to moderate resilience. So I bring this up because this ties to learning agility. If an employee has low resilience, their learning agility is going to be affected. If employees are having a hard time paying their bills, they're going to be occupied with that thought over and over and over again, and their productivity is going to go down, and their ability to learn and adapt to change is going to be affected, because as fear, this low resilience has a lot of fear around it. When you're in that R complex, decision making becomes affected and learning ability becomes affected. If you're afraid on how you're going to feed your family, functioning at work is going to be a lot more difficult, and learning new information is going to be a lot more stressful. Okay, so this is just a graph showing who is resilient and who isn't. So 40% of adults surveyed are considered highly resilient. 60% of the population is at risk of not being able to quickly recover from challenges in scope with adversity. Okay, so just some more details on this. I have a copy of this report. It is from Cigna. It defines what, and I did in a previous presentation, I went over the definition of resilience and the definition of low resilience, moderate resilience, and high resilience, and how this information was accumulated. So if you're interested in that, please go back and watch my previous videos, or you can shoot me an email or use the links down below to contact me, and I can get you a copy of the report. You're having trouble hiring employees, 88% is saying yes, 12% is saying no. Okay, this came from my Wisconsin survey. And why are employers having a hard time hiring? They're having a lack of qualified applications, a labor shortage, and so on. So those are the biggest, 44%, 36%, 44% at lack of qualified applicants. Okay, so as we move through this great resignation and the hiring shortage or the employee shortage, you may have to take on employees with a high learning agility and train them. And there are advantages to doing that. It helps build trust. If an employee is learning at your organization and they love learning, they're absolutely going to love you. They're going to be loyal. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm getting paid to learn. This is amazing. And you may want to have kind of this entry level where they go through training and learning, and you're assessing how well they're doing. And then you give them some sort of a promotion or some sort of an incentive for completing each learning phase and each feigning phase. And this is a great way to kind of weave around some of these labor shortages, and making sure that you have a way of assessing new hires on their learning agility is also very important. And there are lots of organizations popping up around this new trending topic. So I highly recommend that you go and Google it and just dive in for, 30 minutes to 60 minutes. Oh, I think you'll find it very valuable. Okay, so I'm just looking at some of the whys. Why are we having to change? Why are we having to look at some of these initiatives? Why are we having to focus on the employee right now? Obesity trends in children 5 to 19. So these obesity trends are nearing 25% in the United States. Okay, so wellness, if an employee is battling health issues, the productivity is going to go down. It's going to affect your business. If you can offer some ways to help educate employees in these areas, it's certainly going to benefit your business. It might not impact your bottom line tomorrow, but these are investments in your staff that will pay off in the long run. Okay, and so it's placing a bigger burden on the US than any other country. $644 is the obesity burden on the healthcare system. Okay, 41% of adults are reporting anxiety and depression right now. This is from the CDC. According to employees, the top ways in which employers can contribute to overall health. So this is directly from the horse's mouth. If we're looking to drive towards a better employee experience, we need to see what the employees are saying. So greater funding for health coverage costs. You want lower premiums, lower out-of-pocket expenses, and well-being initiatives. Better work-life balance. We've been seeing if two companies offer the same costs, the same income, the same salary, the same earnings ability, and one is offering work at home model or work at home flexibility, we're seeing employees choose the work at home model, and they're jumping ship for that reason. Increasing paid time off, access to broader health benefits, they want more choice, better workplace conditions, access to more robust wellness programs. So here I see this here and here, right? So because I do this every day, I see employees don't always know how to use industry standard terms, right? They don't do HR every day. They don't do insurance every day. So when they're saying well-being initiatives, they're also saying access to wellness programs, gym memberships, massages, etc. And they're saying well-being initiatives, they want access to broader health benefits. Doesn't necessarily mean that they want more insurance options for medical insurance. They might want pet insurance as an addition. I mean, there's all sorts of supplemental benefits that can be offered that add to this bucket. And that is what employees are asking for. Okay, obviously they want lower deductibles and they don't want to pay as much out of their paycheck, of course. Everybody always wants that, right? So access to broader health benefits, health isn't just medical. Health, employees, when employees say health, they mean the whole thing. Disability, life insurance, all the wellness programs, smoking cessation, coaching, all those things. Ongoing support and new working models, such as working from home, flexible hours, yada, yada, yada. Broader mental health benefits. Oh, that's the other one that I would include in number 4. So they want to pay less for insurance. They want to be able to work from home and have a flexible schedule. If they want to work at midnight, they want that to count towards their hours or their company time, or a results-based model. They want a safer workplace, of course, and broader benefits. You could really just go down to 4 things in here. Okay. Whoops. Okay, so synergies between employee well-being and productivity. There's a good work-life balance if employees feel as though there's a good work-life balance. 54%. Okay, see productivity increase. Access to quality care. So having an insurance plan where they can't see anybody, they got 2 physicians that take their plan. That's going to be a stress. Safe working conditions, 46%. And employees' work-life balance, access to healthcare. Okay, so employees want the work-life balance and executives want access to healthcare. Okay, so as we're bringing this one home, we're looking at what drives low productivity, right? So in order to get more productive, sometimes we have to look at the what is impeding productivity and remove those barriers as much as possible. So lack of skill, so training, education, and information, easy access to information, lack of technology, so making sure the systems match the task, relationships between the employee and the employer. Is there trust there, or is there not trust? Lack of commitment. Is there transparency, accountability, consequences, rewards, and appreciation? Physical conditions. And so I would include in conditions, I would include the culture and the environment and the benefits and the environment in their mind as well. So mental health. So these could really all overlap in some way. So why is this employee experience so important? these surveys are showing that when an employer has an increased positive employee experience, then their culture is improved, their employee engagement is improved, and employee well-being is improved. Okay. And they have significantly higher productivity, almost 3 times productivity, and 90% lower turnover. Okay. So as we look at this, I would ask you to look at stickiness. We have heard of the stickiness with our clients and our customers, but also ask yourself, how can we create stickiness with our employees? We've all heard of the stickiness with our customers, but we need to ask the same questions surrounding our staff and our management. What if we focused on stickiness for our employees? What would less turnover do for your business? What would that 90% less turnover do for your business? I mean, think about that. I mean, if a lot of times when we're driving towards, okay, how do we monetize this? How do we see this reflected in the bottom line? It's a exponential curve. It's just like investments, you might get 5% a year. Well, that's compounding interest. So that's the same with the employee experience and reducing turnover. It's this exponential effect that happens. And what would happier and healthier employees do for your business? It would create more stickiness with your clients, because your clients are dealing with a lot of the same people year over year. So if your clients are creating relationships with these employees that have been with you for years, it's going to drive towards your goal of creating stickiness in your business. Okay, so how? We're getting into some of the hows, and I went over this last week. You're going to want to clear the room, do what I call a brain dump, write everything down, get all the chatter out of your mind onto a piece of paper, make sure all that is calendared and in your calendar so you can really focus on the questionnaire and the assessments that I have. I have some links down below if you're interested in looking at those. Like I said, there's a couple of different steps. So there's a questionnaire and an assessment, and then some additional questionnaires depending on where you are in the process. Okay. Map it out. It's like eating an elephant. It's one step at a time, one bite at a time. So there's online systems for improving communication. There's communication strategies. There's culture. There's onboarding. There's wellness programs. There's benefits. There's education, employee survey. You got to map it out. Okay. And again, these are all the initiatives that are floating around in the ether that are super important and that can help support company values. And it's hard to really hone in on those. And that's why we have this assessment process. And it is difficult to prioritize when everything is on fire. That's why I ask, before you take any of these questionnaires or any of these assessments, you get out of your desk, away from your office, go to a quiet place, get your pen and paper, do a brain dump, get it all out, get it scheduled, get your focus there, and then answer these questions honestly and clearly. Okay. Because it's difficult to really visualize a better future and a better way of doing things when you're overwhelmed, overburdened with all and everything's on fire. Okay. So we ask questions. We try to get to grade. We want to see what's a 1 and what's a 10 on each of these areas. And then we come up with some suggestions on initiatives, and we do this together. Okay, so again, not every company is going to start with onboarding. That tends to be the way that most do go through the process. Most want to work on onboarding and then go from there. Not during renewal. So it depends on the timing, right? So if somebody comes to me and their renewals in 2 weeks, we would want to schedule the onboarding systems adjustments and look at that at a later date and get through the renewal and the open enrollment and all that fun stuff. Okay. So these assessments are like having a heads up display where you're seeing where your strengths and your weaknesses are, either personally or within your department or within your organization, whatever your role is, and seeing those clearly and saying, oh, I'm going the speed limit, but I might be a little bit close to this car in front of me. So let's back it up, right? So you might want to be working on the 1. So if you graded yourself a 1 on, let's say, communicating with management, okay, so let's look at that. And can we drive towards some training in that area? If you graded yourself in a 1 in wellness, okay, maybe we focus on that, talk about how to improve your wellness strategies and so on. Okay, so it's just a way of pinpointing what area we're going to dive into and then dive into that further. So we're just steering the focus, your team's focus, the focus of your department in one particular area. So life is one big creative process. It's a blank canvas every day. We have control of every single, we don't have control of everything that happens. It's like driving a car. We're steering, we can't control the road, and we can't control the other drivers. Okay. So we can just do our best to support our teams, try to educate them, and try to drive the focus of that department or that company as best we can. Okay. There may be you're driving, there may be a pothole you didn't see, and now your tire's popped, and you got to pull over and change the tire. Okay, people get sick, people quit, systems crash, IT teams, end up working through the night for service on certain days, and that might delay an initiative or a project or the thing you wanted to work on today. It happens, but you're still driving your focus towards a specific result and a specific initiative, and we want to know what those are, what those values and those initiatives are. We get to know the car and the capabilities, the best way to get through the road ahead to get the destination we choose. It doesn't mean you have to take the freeway. Okay. Do you want to take the scenic route? It's okay to take things a little bit slower and analyze every step of the process along the way and dissect. Some people love working that way. They go slow through implementation, they go slow through certain processes because they want to see all of the pitfalls and take the scenic route. Others just want to drive to the finish line. I'm taking the freeway, I'm not stopping to eat, I'm going straight from LA to Vegas in the shortest amount of time possible, maybe even speed a little bit. Not too much, just 10 miles over the speed limit, maybe. So we're all a little bit different. We all have different cars. We need to get to know that car and its capabilities and the best way to get through the road ahead. Okay. Do we have a Ferrari? Do we have a off-road vehicle? Are we taking the off-road route? And so on. Okay, I think you get my point. So goals and deliverables, milestones. So as we pick a initiative, we talk about what are the milestones and what's the realistic time for completion in this project. Come up with some sort of a timeline and figure out who the participants are in the project, who we're going to be working with, and who's going to be getting what information to us or to other vendors throughout the process, and so on. Once you've prioritized, we're coming up with the planning phase and so on. And as we're going through, yes, changes, sure. As we make changes, we have to be aware of scope creep as we make changes. So scope creep is going to possibly, if you're increasing the scope of a project, you're going to impact quality, the time spent, and possibly resources like costs. So a lot of times when HR is working on a project or any department is working on a project and maybe the CEO gets involved in some way and the CEO wants to grow, let's say, oh, what if we did this? What if we did, add. that is going to change the scope of the project. It could impact costs. And so as we go through these projects, there's going to be certain points where we need to evaluate each change and adjust the time horizon or the quality of work or the cost of the work. Okay, so again, just looking at the triple constraints, got quality, schedule, and costs. And this is a great graph. I absolutely love this one. It's showing what happens when you increase quality, what happens when you decrease quality, what happens when the scope, this triangle gets bigger, these other ones have to get bigger, and so on. Okay. So I love this. This is my picture for resistance. So as we're leading people or leading ourselves, oftentimes we get resistance. And in this, when I'm looking at this for myself internally, as I'm proposing change to myself, there's a part of me that doesn't want to go forward with it. And perhaps that is due to the toddler. The dog doesn't want to follow the toddler. Am I being immature in any way? Am I being emotionally immature? Am I being an adult in this evaluation and self-reflection? So those are all things that often comes up when I'm doing self-evaluation and making sure that I understand the argument that's going on in my head. So I look forward to meeting you. There are links down below if you want to move forward with an assessment or questionnaire or have any questions. If you want any materials, any of the studies that I touched on today, I'm happy to provide those. And I appreciate you sticking around to the end. Please like and subscribe. Please share the video with anyone that you think will find this interesting or valuable in any way. And I will talk to you next time.